The little green dot was still glowing at the top of my laptop screen. I stared at it, my hand frozen on the trackpad, my coffee going cold beside me. Victoria's face had disappeared from the Zoom window, but her voice hadn't, and neither had the other voice, a woman I didn't recognize. "She's completely clueless," my daughter-in-law said. "Honestly, it's almost sad. She thinks we're calling to check on her, every Sunday like clockwork. She has no idea." A laugh from the other woman. "And Ryan's on board?" "Ryan does what I tell him. He's always been soft about his mother, but I've been working on that, 3 years now. He barely talks to her unless I'm there to manage it." I should have clicked the red button. I should have ended the call right then. I didn't. "So the pension," the other woman continued. "How much are we talking?" $4,200 a month, state teacher's retirement, guaranteed for life. Plus, she's got savings, probably $200,000, maybe more. Harold left her everything when he died, and she hasn't touched most of it. Just sits in that little house, paying cash for everything like it's 1985. And she'll sign the power of attorney? She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. I've been laying the groundwork for months. Little comments about her memory, how worried we are. Ryan's starting to believe it too. Last Thanksgiving, I convinced him she left the stove on. She didn't. I turned it on myself. But now he's paranoid. One more incident, maybe 2, and we can get the POA pushed through without any questions. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Before I continue, I need you to understand something. I'm 67 years old. I spent 38 years as a school librarian in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg public school system. I raised 2 children, buried a husband, and paid off a mortgage with money I earned, dollar by dollar, summer by summer, working part-time jobs during breaks because teachers don't get wealthy and librarians get even less. I have never in my life been called clueless, and I have never, not once, left the stove on. "What about the house?" the other woman asked. "That's phase 2. Once we have power of attorney, we move her into assisted living. Ryan won't fight it if I tell him she's a danger to herself. We sell the house. It's worth at least $350 in this market, and put the money into her care, which means our care, our mortgage, our credit cards. How much do you owe?" Silence. Then, "Enough. Let's just say the lifestyle we show people isn't exactly paid for. But once we get Maggie's assets under control, we're golden." Maggie. She called me Maggie. To my face, she always called me Mom. I don't know how long I sat there. A minute, maybe 2. The conversation kept going. Details about bank appointments, how to phrase things to Ryan, which assisted living facilities looked legitimate but were desperate enough to take anyone with a checkbook. Then Victoria's voice said, "Hold on, let me make sure the call dropped." I heard clicking, and then, "Oh my God, the call's still..." The screen went black. That's when I realized I hadn't just overheard a conversation. I'd witnessed a confession. I sat in my living room for a very long time after that. The house was quiet. Harold's old grandfather clock ticked in the hallway, the same rhythm it had kept for 40 years. Outside, Mrs. Patterson was walking her terrier. A normal Sunday. A normal November afternoon. Nothing was normal anymore. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs and made myself breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The same technique I'd taught anxious students before standardized tests. You can cry later, I told myself. Right now, you need to think. Because here's what I knew. Victoria had just revealed in her own voice a plan to steal my pension, take my house, and lock me away in a facility. Not because I needed it, but because she needed my money. And my son was either helping her or being manipulated so completely he might as well be. Either way, my family had become my enemy. And the woman who'd been calling me mom for 6 years, who'd hugged me at my husband's funeral, who'd cried when I helped them with the down payment on their house, that woman wanted to erase me. I picked up my phone. My first instinct was to call Ryan, to scream at him, to demand answers, to ask how could you? But I stopped, because if I called him now, angry and raw, Victoria would know. She'd spin it. She'd tell him I was having an episode. She'd use my anger as proof of exactly what she'd been claiming, that I was confused, unstable, losing it. She would win. I set the phone down. I stayed calm. I needed proof. Let me tell you who I am. Not who Victoria thinks I am. Some doddering old woman too naive to notice she's being robbed. Who I actually am. My name is Margaret Hollister. My parents called me Maggie. Harold called me Maggie. My students called me Mrs. H, and some of them still write to me. I was born in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1957, the daughter of a shipyard welder and a woman who cleaned houses for families that wouldn't let her use their front door. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I worked 3 jobs to pay for it. Waiting tables, shelving books at the campus library, and tutoring rich kids who didn't know how lucky they were. I became a librarian because I believed books could save people. And in 38 years, I watched that belief prove true hundreds of times. Kids who came to me angry and lost, who found something in a story that made them feel seen. Teenagers who didn't know who they were until they read someone who'd felt the same way. Adults who came back years later to tell me that the library had been the only safe place in their childhood. I wasn't just a librarian. I was a guardian of words, a keeper of secrets, a person who understood that information, the right information at the right time, could change everything. I retired 4 years ago, 6 months before Harold died. Harold Hollister was an electrician. He built things with his hands. He never made more than $50,000 a year, but he saved like every dollar was the last one, and when he died, he left me secure. The house was paid off. The savings were solid. My pension was steady. I didn't need much. I never had. What I needed was my son. Ryan was born in 1988, and from the moment the nurse put him in my arms, I knew he was going to break my heart. Not because he was cruel, because he was soft. He felt everything too deeply. He cried at movies. He brought home injured birds. He once refused to speak to Harold for a week because Harold killed a spider in the garage. That spider wasn't hurting anyone, Ryan said, all of 8 years old, his face red with righteous anger. He was just living his life. Harold looked at me over Ryan's head, and I saw the question in his eyes. What do we do with this kid? We loved him. That's what we did. We loved him exactly as he was. Tender-hearted, easily wounded, desperate to make everyone around him happy. As a child, this made him beautiful. As an adult, it made him vulnerable. He was the kid who got picked on in middle school because he wouldn't fight back. The teenager who dated girls who treated him badly because he believed he could fix them. The young man who chose jobs based on what his friends were doing, not what he actually wanted. Ryan needed to be needed. It was his compass and his curse. I watched him search for someone to anchor himself to, and I prayed he'd find someone worthy. He didn't. He met Victoria Chen at a marketing conference in Atlanta when he was 30. She was smart, ambitious, and polished in a way that seemed to dazzle him. She came from a family with money, Her father owned a chain of dry cleaners across the Research Triangle, and she moved through the world like she deserved to be there. Ryan, who'd always felt like he was trying to catch up, looked at her like she was a door to somewhere better. "She's amazing, Mom," he told me on the phone that night. "She's got this energy, you know? Like she knows exactly what she wants and how to get it." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What does she want?" A pause. "Everything. She wants everything." I should have heard the warning in that. I didn't. I liked her at first. I'll admit that. The first time Ryan brought her home, she was charming in a way that felt almost effortless. She complimented the house, asked about the garden Harold was trying to start, noticed the books on my shelves, and asked intelligent questions about them. "You were a librarian for 38 years?" she said. "That's incredible. You must have so many stories." "A few," I admitted. "I'd love to hear them sometime. Ryan never talks about his childhood. I feel like I'm missing so much." She brought wine to dinners. She asked about my career. She remembered details, what books I was reading, which former students had visited. She seemed interested in a way that felt rare. "You're so lucky," she told me once, early on. "You did something that mattered. All I do is convince people to buy things they don't need." I thought she was humble, self-aware. I didn't realize she was taking notes. Harold was the first to notice something off. It was about a year into Ryan and Victoria's relationship. They'd come down for Easter dinner, and Harold and I were washing dishes while Ryan showed Victoria something in the garage. "She asks a lot of questions," Harold said, his hands in the soapy water. "She's curious, getting to know the family." "Maybe." He didn't sound convinced. "But have you noticed she never answers any?" I thought about it. He was right. Victoria deflected personal questions with impressive skill. When I asked about her childhood, she talked about her parents' business. When I asked about her dreams, she talked about Ryan's career. She was a mirror, reflecting back whatever you wanted to see. "Some people are private," I said. "Some people are hiding something." Harold was like that. He could read people the way I could read books, quickly, accurately, without needing to be told the ending. "Do you not like her?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't trust her, but Ryan loves her, so I'll keep my mouth shut and hope I'm wrong." He wasn't wrong, but by the time I understood that, Harold was gone, and I was alone. They got married in 2019, a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Asheville. Harold was already sick by then. Congestive heart failure, the slow kind that steals your breath 1 percentile at a time. But he insisted on walking Ryan down the aisle. "He's our only boy," he said. "I'm not missing this." Harold had to stop twice during the walk, pretending to admire the flowers, but he made it. He stood next to Ryan at the altar and watched him marry Victoria Chen, and when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Harold leaned over to me and whispered, "God help him." I didn't say anything. I just squeezed his hand. We gave them $20,000 for the wedding. We gave them another $40,000 for the down payment on their house, a new construction in a development called Harmony Ridge, all stone facades and 3-car garages and HOA fees that made my eyes water. "It's an investment," Victoria explained when she showed us the floor plans. "Property values in this area are only going up. In 10 years, this house will be worth double what we paid." I didn't begrudge them the money. Harold and I had worked our whole lives so we could give our children a better start. But I noticed something at the wedding. When Victoria's mother pulled me aside during the reception, she didn't say congratulations. She said, I hope they can keep up with themselves. I'm sorry? Mrs. Chen smiled tightly. Victoria has expensive taste. Always has. Her father and I stopped funding that taste years ago. I just hope Ryan knows what he's signed up for. I didn't understand then. I do now. The first 2 years of their marriage, everything seemed fine. Busy. Victoria was promoted twice. Ryan was managing a team at his tech firm. But fine. They came for holidays. They called on birthdays. Victoria sent flowers on Mother's Day. Expensive arrangements from a florist I'd never heard of. Delivered with cards that said things like, "To the best mother-in-law a girl could ask for." I saved those cards. I still have them. I look at them sometimes, at her handwriting, and I try to understand how someone could write those words while planning to destroy me. Then the pandemic hit, and the Zoom calls started. Every Sunday at 2 p.m., without fail. Victoria organized them. She'd send calendar invites with little notes. "Family check-in. We miss you, Mom." The first few calls were awkward. Technology and I have never been friends, but Victoria was patient. She walked me through the settings, showed me how to unmute, teased me gently when I accidentally turned on a filter that gave me cat ears. "You're adorable, Mom. Never change." I thought she meant it. Harold died in October 2020. I sat beside his hospital bed for 3 days, but the rules said only one visitor. Ryan couldn't get in. He said goodbye through a window, his hand pressed against the glass while Harold's monitor flatlined. The last thing Harold said to me was, "Watch out for her." I thought he meant Victoria. Now I realize he might have meant myself. After that, the Zoom calls became my lifeline. Victoria always led them. She'd ask about my week, my health, my neighbors. She'd bring up memories. "Remember when Harold taught Ryan to fix a faucet?" And I'd cry, and she'd look so concerned. "We worry about you, Mom, all alone in that house." I thought it was love. I thought she cared. The first anomaly happened 8 months ago. It was a small thing. So small I almost didn't notice. I'd been on a Sunday call, telling them about a plumbing issue I'd had fixed. The kitchen faucet had been leaking for weeks, a slow drip that kept me awake at night, and I'd finally called a plumber. "You hired someone?" Victoria asked. "You didn't think to ask Ryan first?" "Ryan's an hour away, and the plumber charged $60. $60. She said it like I'd confessed to gambling. "That's standard for a service call," Ryan added. "Mom, don't worry about—" "I'm not worried." Victoria's voice was smooth, but I caught something underneath. "I just think we should be involved in these decisions. What if you'd hired someone unreliable? What if he'd overcharged you?" It was a recommendation from Mrs. Patterson. She's used him for years. Mrs. Patterson is 82, and she's been a homeowner for 60 of those years. I think she knows a good plumber. Victoria smiled tightly. "Of course. I'm just saying it would be nice to be in the loop." After the call, I went to my kitchen and looked at the faucet. Perfect seal, no drip, $60 well spent. But something about her tone stayed with me. In the loop. What business was it of hers who fixed my faucet? 3 weeks later, she asked, casually, during another call, whether I'd considered giving Ryan access to my bank accounts. "Just for emergencies. If something happened to you, God forbid, he'd need to pay your bills." "I have everything set up for automatic payment," I said. "And Ryan's already on my emergency contact list at the bank." "Emergency contact isn't the same as signatory access, Mom." "I know the difference." "I'm sure you do. She paused, arranged her face into concern. "We've been reading about financial exploitation of seniors. It's terrifying, Mom. Strangers call pretending to be from the IRS, or they show up at the door with fake home repair schemes. Having Ryan on your accounts would give you a layer of protection. I appreciate the thought, sweetheart, but I've managed my finances just fine for 67 years. Another tight smile. Of course you have. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't. The second anomaly was at Thanksgiving. They came to my house, the first time since the pandemic started. Victoria brought a casserole that she called elevated green bean and a bottle of wine that she made sure I knew cost $80. You don't have to bring anything, I said. I wanted to. You deserve nice things, Mom. Dinner was fine. Normal. Ryan was quiet. More quiet than usual, but I assumed he was tired from the drive. He barely ate, pushing food around his plate while Victoria dominated the conversation with stories about her work, her yoga class, her plans for redecorating their guest room. Then, while I was washing dishes, Victoria came into the kitchen. Mom, did you know the stove was on? I turned around. The burner was glowing red. I hadn't used that burner all day. I didn't turn that on, I said. It was on when I came in here. She was already typing on her phone. Ryan, come here. Your mom left the stove on. Ryan appeared in the doorway. He looked at me, then at the burner, then at Victoria. Mom, you've got to be more careful. I didn't turn it on. It's okay. Victoria's voice was soothing, gentle. It happens. My grandmother used to do the same thing before we moved her into assisted care. She said it like it was comfort. I heard it like a warning. That night, after they left, I checked every burner 3 times. I photographed the stove, all knobs at off, and sent the picture to myself with a timestamp. I didn't know why. Something in me just knew. After Thanksgiving, the calls changed. Not obviously. Victoria was still warm, still attentive, but the questions got more specific. Have you thought about what happens if you fall, Mom, with no one there to find you? Do you have a financial advisor? Someone helping you manage everything? Ryan and I were talking, and we think it might be a good idea to get your affairs in order, just in case. Just in case. I started writing things down after each call. Dates, questions, my answers. Not because I suspected anything, not consciously, but because something felt off. The way you can feel a storm coming before the sky changes. By September, Victoria had mentioned assisted living 4 times. She'd brought up power of attorney 3 times. She'd asked about my savings twice. And she'd started suggesting, very gently, that my memory wasn't what it used to be. Remember last week when you forgot we were calling on Sunday? I hadn't forgotten. I'd been at a doctor's appointment. I'd told her a week in advance. You told me, Mom, but then you seemed confused about the time when we talked. I wasn't confused, but I started to wonder if I was. That's the thing about gaslighting. It doesn't work by convincing you that black is white. It works by making you doubt whether you know the difference. Then came November 12th. The Zoom call that changed everything. We'd been talking for 15 minutes, the usual pleasantries, Ryan nodding along while Victoria led. When Victoria said she needed to take another call. Work emergency. Ryan, keep talking to Mom. I'll be right back. She clicked something on her screen. Her video went black. But the green dot stayed on, and I heard her voice, clear as day, pick up another line and say, Hey, I'm on with the mother-in-law, but she's totally tuned out. What did the lawyer say? I should have spoken. I should have said, I can still hear you. But something stopped me. Call it instinct. Call it 38 years of watching people reveal themselves when they thought no one was paying attention. I minimized my video window so my face was smaller, less visible if she glanced at her screen. Ryan was rambling about a project at work. I nodded along, made appropriate sounds, but all my attention was on Victoria's voice bleeding through her supposedly muted microphone. "The power of attorney has to look voluntary," the other woman said. "If anyone suspects coercion, it's invalidated." "That's why I've been building the case," Victoria said. "Ryan already thinks she's slipping. 2 more incidents. Maybe she forgets to lock the door. Maybe she gets lost driving somewhere. And he'll push for the POA himself. I won't even have to suggest it." "You're sure he doesn't know what you're actually planning?" A pause. Then, "Ryan knows what I tell him. He doesn't ask questions. He never has." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a daughter-in-law being overly cautious about her aging mother-in-law's finances. This was a plan. A calculated, deliberate, years-long plan to take everything I had. The conversation went on for 11 more minutes. I heard them discuss my pension, my savings, my house. I heard them talk about a timeline: POA by January, assisted living by March, house on the market by summer. I heard Victoria say, "Once we have control, we can move everything into a trust that we manage. She'll never see a statement." And then I heard the sentence that changed everything. "The best part," Victoria said, "is that she actually trusts me. She thinks I'm the daughter she never had. She'll sign anything I put in front of her because she wants to believe I love her." Silence on the line. Then, "Do you love her?" Victoria laughed. "I love what she's worth." The call ended 2 minutes later. Victoria came back on video, all smiles, apologizing for the interruption. I made myself smile back. I told her it was fine. I told her I was tired, that I should probably get some rest. "We worry about you, Mom," she said. "I know you do, sweetheart." The word tasted like ash in my mouth. After we hung up, I sat very still for a long time. The grandfather clock ticked. Mrs. Patterson's terrier barked at something. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to cry or accuse or give Victoria anything she could use against me. I was going to find proof, document everything, build a case so airtight that when I finally acted, there would be no room for her to spin, deflect, or gaslight. I'd spent 38 years teaching children that knowledge was power. Now I was going to prove it. The next morning, something was different. I woke up at 5 a.m., not from anxiety, from clarity. That cold, clean feeling when you finally see the whole board. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, the kind I used to use for budget meetings at the library, and I wrote down everything I remembered from the call. Every name Victoria mentioned, every amount, every timeline reference. Then I wrote down what I needed to find out. 1. Was the Zoom call recorded somewhere? 2. How bad were Ryan and Victoria's finances? 3. Had Victoria already taken any steps, contacted my bank, requested documents, talked to facilities? 4. Who was the woman on the other call? 5. Was there anyone else involved? I looked at the list. Then I added one more line. 1. Does Ryan know the truth? That question hurt more than all the others combined. The first thing I learned was about Zoom recordings. I'd never paid much attention to the settings before. The calls were always started by Victoria, from her account, and I just clicked the link she sent. But that morning, I logged into my own Zoom account. I'd set one up years ago for a library committee that never met, and started reading the help documentation. What I found made my stomach drop. Zoom has an automatic recording feature. If the host enables it, every call is saved to the cloud. I didn't know if Victoria had enabled it. But if she had, there might be a recording of our calls, including the one where her audio hadn't actually muted. The problem was, I'd need access to her account to find out. Or I'd need someone who could get that access legally. I wrote down, need lawyer, tech savvy, understands digital evidence. The second thing I did was call my bank, not to make a complaint, just to ask questions. Good morning, this is First Citizens. How can I help you? Hi, my name is Margaret Hollister. I have a checking and savings account with you, and I wanted to verify what authorized users are on my account. A pause. Clicking. Mrs. Hollister, I show you as the sole owner and authorized signatory. No other names on the account. Relief washed through me. Has anyone else tried to add themselves or made inquiries about the account? More clicking. I'm showing a phone inquiry on October 3rd. Someone called asking about the process for adding a signatory and about power of attorney requirements. Who called? I don't have a name. The notes say the caller identified themselves as a family member. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. Can you flag my account for additional security? I'd like to be notified of any changes or inquiries. Of course, Mrs. Hollister. I'll add a verbal password requirement and set up email alerts. What would you like the password to be? I thought for a moment. Wilmington, 1957. Got it. Anything else? Yes. Do you have records of the phone number that called? She gave me the number. I wrote it down. It wasn't Ryan's. It wasn't Victoria's. At least, not the numbers I had saved. It was someone else. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was already adding up. My daughter-in-law had plotted to steal from me. She'd called my bank or had someone call for her. She'd recruited at least one other person, and she'd spent years making everyone around me, including my own son, question my competence. I needed help, professional help. Not just a lawyer, but someone who understood how these things worked from the inside. I remembered a name, Helen Marcus. She'd been one of my library regulars for years, a quiet woman who came in every Tuesday to read legal thrillers. We'd talked books mostly, but I knew she was a retired attorney. Elder law, she'd said once. Helping old people like us not get screwed by our kids. I'd laughed at the time. I wasn't laughing now. I found Helen's number in my old library contacts. She'd served on a Friends of the Library committee years ago. She picked up on the third ring. Helen, this is Maggie Hollister. I don't know if you remember me. Maggie, the librarian. Of course I remember you. You're the one who got me hooked on John Grisham. How are you? I'm in trouble, Helen. I think I need a lawyer. A beat of silence. Then, in a completely different voice, tell me everything. I did. I told her about the calls, the questions, the stove incident, the Zoom recording, the bank inquiry. I told her what I'd heard Victoria say, every word. When I finished, Helen was quiet for a long moment. Maggie, what you're describing is elder financial abuse. It's a crime in North Carolina. And if what you heard is accurate, it sounds like your daughter-in-law has been planning this for years. I know. Do you have any proof? Beyond what you heard? I have notes. Dates. The bank gave me the phone number of whoever called about my account. That's a start. But we need more. If you're going to stop this and protect yourself from whatever she does when she realizes you know, you need documentation. That's why I'm calling you. Helen paused. I retired 5 years ago, Maggie, but I still have contacts. There's a woman I know, Catherine Walsh. She specializes in exactly this kind of case. Financial exploitation, POA fraud, capacity challenges. She's good, and she's mean, in the best possible way. I need mean. I'll call her this afternoon. In the meantime, don't confront your daughter-in-law. Don't change your behavior. And for God's sake, don't sign anything. Helen, I spent almost 4 decades teaching teenagers to think critically and check their sources. I'm not signing a damn thing. She laughed. I knew I liked you. Catherine Walsh called me the next day. Her voice was brisk, efficient, with just enough warmth to suggest she cared about more than billing hours. We arranged to meet at her office in uptown Charlotte, a glass-walled firm on the 14th floor of a building I'd walked past 100 times without ever going inside. I dressed carefully that morning, not to impress her, to remind myself who I was. Navy slacks, a cream blouse, the pearl earrings Harold gave me for our 25th anniversary. I wasn't a victim. I was a client with a case to build. The elevator ride up was quiet. I watched the floor numbers climb and thought about how strange life was. 2 weeks ago, I'd been a retired librarian with Sunday Zoom calls and a quiet routine. Now I was riding up to meet a lawyer to discuss how to stop my daughter-in-law from stealing my future. The receptionist led me to Catherine's office. It was organized, but not cold. Diplomas on one wall, photos of what looked like grandchildren on another. Bookshelves lined with legal texts and, I noticed with approval, a few novels mixed in. She was maybe 60, silver-haired, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd heard every lie and knew how to unravel them. Mrs. Hollister, sit down. Tell me what you've told Helen, but this time I'm going to take notes. I told her again. All of it. When I mentioned the Zoom call, she held up a hand. Stop there. You said her video went black, but the audio continued. Yes. I could hear everything she said on the other call. Did you record it? I felt my stomach sink. No, I didn't think. It happened so fast. It's all right, but here's what I need you to do. She leaned forward. Zoom keeps call logs, timestamps, durations, whether recording was enabled. If she was the host, those records are on her account. We might be able to subpoena them if we file a protective action. What's that? It's a preemptive move. We file a declaration with the court stating that you have not granted power of attorney to anyone and that any documents claiming otherwise are invalid. We also request a judicial review of your capacity, done by a court-appointed physician, not someone your daughter-in-law chooses. Can she still try to get POA if we do that? She can try, but she'll have to go through the court, which means transparency, documentation, and a judge who's seen this playbook before. Catherine's eyes were steady. This isn't my first case like this, Mrs. Hollister. It won't be my last. The people who do what your daughter-in-law is doing, they count on shame, confusion, and family loyalty to protect them. They don't count on lawyers. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but hope. There's something else, I said. The phone number that called my bank. It wasn't Victoria's. It wasn't Ryan's. Someone else is involved. Catherine wrote down the number I gave her. I have an investigator I work with. Former police, specializes in fraud. I'll have him run this down. She looked up. In the meantime, I need you to get me everything you can. Bank statements, any written communication from your daughter-in-law, notes from your calls, and if there's any way you can document future interactions. Record them, you mean? North Carolina is a one-party consent state. You can record any conversation you're part of without telling the other party. It's legal, and it might save your life savings. I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, I was a librarian for 38 years, Catherine. I know how to keep records. She smiled. I had a feeling you would. That night, I set up a recording app on my phone. The technology took some figuring out. I'm not a Luddite, but I'm also not a teenager. But by midnight, I had it working. Every phone call, every voice memo, backed up to a cloud account that only I could access. Then I started building my evidence folder. I printed every text message I'd exchanged with Victoria in the past year. I sorted them by date, noting the ones where she'd asked about finances, my health, my living situation. I pulled my bank statements for the past 18 months and highlighted every inquiry, every unusual contact. I wrote a timeline, every Sunday call, every visit, every comment she'd made about my memory, my safety, my need for help. By 3 a.m., I had 47 pages of documentation. I wasn't clueless anymore. I was armed. The next few days were a blur of research and preparation. I went to the library, my old library, where I still knew most of the staff, and used the public computers to research elder financial abuse. The statistics were staggering. Nearly 1 in 10 Americans over 65 experiences some form of elder abuse each year. Financial exploitation costs seniors an estimated $3 billion annually. And the perpetrators? More often than not, they're family members, children, grandchildren, spouses, in-laws. The people you trust most are the people best positioned to betray you. I printed out articles, case studies, warning signs. I read about how abusers isolate their victims, how they gaslight them into doubting their own memories, how they use legal mechanisms like power of attorney to gain control while maintaining the appearance of legitimacy. Everything they described, Victoria had done. Everything. The investigator Catherine recommended was named David Chen. No relation to Victoria's family, which I confirmed before agreeing to work with him. He came to my house on a Thursday afternoon, a compact man in his 50s with a notepad and a face that gave away nothing. He was dressed casually, khakis and a polo shirt. But there was something about the way he moved that made me think of coiled springs. Alert. Ready. Mrs. Hollister. Catherine's told me the basics. I just have a few questions before I start digging. Ask whatever you need. The phone number that called your bank. Do you have any idea who it might be? No, it's not a number I recognize. He wrote something down. I'll run it through some databases, see what comes up. Could be a burner phone. Could be a legitimate contact we haven't identified yet. He paused. Catherine mentioned you heard your daughter-in-law talking to another woman on the Zoom call. Any sense of who that was? Friend? Family? Professional? I thought back. The voice had been crisp, businesslike, not warm like a friend. It sounded transactional, like they were discussing a plan, not chatting. Could have been a financial advisor, someone helping her structure the theft. David wrote something down. I'll need a list of any professionals your daughter-in-law has mentioned. Accountants, lawyers, financial planners, anyone who might have a reason to help her access your assets. She's never mentioned anyone specific, but she did ask once if I had a financial advisor. Did she seem disappointed when you said you didn't? I thought about it. No, she seemed relieved. David's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. That's interesting, he said. If she has someone advising her on this, they're probably keeping their name out of it. Smart, plausible deniability. But it also means there's a paper trail somewhere. These things always leave traces. What kind of traces? Emails, texts, calendar appointments, bank records. If your daughter-in-law is working with someone, they've communicated somehow. We just have to find it. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Mrs. Hollister, one more thing. Your son, Ryan, do you believe he knows what his wife is planning? The question hit me like a blow. I don't know, I said honestly. I want to believe he doesn't, but I can't be sure. David nodded. That's the hardest part of these cases. Family. People want to believe the best about the people they love. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're not. Either way, we'll find out. A week later, David called with his first report. The phone number that called your bank belongs to a prepaid cell phone, purchased at a Walmart in South Charlotte, paid for in cash. No way to trace the buyer directly. My heart sank. So it's a dead end? Not necessarily. I pulled the purchase record from the store. The phone was bought on September 28th, 3 days before the call to your bank. I'm working on getting security footage from that day. If we can see who bought the phone, we might have our answer. That's when I noticed something. September 28th. I opened my timeline on my laptop. David, wait. September 28th was a Sunday. Victoria and Ryan came to visit that weekend. They drove down from their house, had brunch with me, then said they were going shopping before heading home. Silence on the line. Did they say where they were shopping? South Charlotte. Victoria mentioned they were looking at furniture for their guest room. She talked about it for 20 minutes. All these design ideas, fabric samples, color palettes. I remember thinking how much she'd changed from the woman who used to say she didn't care about material things. Mrs. Hollister, can you confirm that? Any receipts, photos, anything that puts them at a specific location that day? I thought back. Victoria had posted photos that afternoon, the two of them at a restaurant, tagging the location. I'd liked the photo. I remembered thinking how nice they looked together. She posted on social media. I can find it. Send me everything. If we can prove they were in South Charlotte that day, within range of that Walmart, it's circumstantial. But it's something. I found the photos within minutes. A restaurant called The Fig Tree, time stamped 1:47 p.m. The Walmart was 3 miles away. I sent everything to David. Then I sat back and let the implications sink in. Victoria had bought a burner phone specifically to call my bank. She'd planned it in advance. She'd done it while visiting me, probably while I was making lunch, probably while I thought everything was fine. I didn't want to believe it, but the proof was right there. 2 days later, David called again. I've got the Walmart footage. Already? I have contacts. Loss prevention manager owed me a favor. He paused. Mrs. Hollister, I'm going to send you a screenshot. Are you near your computer? Yes. Open it when it comes through. Tell me what you see. My email chimed. I clicked on the attachment, and my heart stopped. It wasn't Victoria buying the phone. It was Ryan. I stared at the photo for a long time. My son, my boy, standing at a checkout counter, handing cash to a clerk, a small phone box visible on the counter in front of him. He was wearing the jacket I'd given him for his birthday, the blue one with the brass buttons. I'd helped him pick it out. Mrs. Hollister, are you still there? Yes. My voice was steady. I was surprised by that. I'm here. I know this isn't what you wanted to see, but it's evidence. He bought the phone. Whether he made the call or just bought it for Victoria, he's involved. I know. What do you want me to do? I looked at the photo again. My son, the little boy who cried at movies, the teenager who once stayed up all night to help me alphabetize donation books, the man who'd held my hand at his father's funeral and promised he'd always be there for me. Keep digging, I said. I need to know everything. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Ryan buying the phone. Ryan, not Victoria. It could mean he was fully complicit. That everything I'd hoped, that he was being manipulated, that he didn't really understand what his wife was planning, was a lie I'd told myself to avoid the worst truth. Or it could mean something else. Victoria had said it on the call. Ryan does what I tell him. What if she'd told him to buy the phone without explaining why? What if she'd given him some excuse? A surprise for me, a work thing, something innocent, and he'd believed her. It wouldn't make him blameless, but it would make him a different kind of guilty. I needed to know which. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Harold died. I went through Ryan's room. It wasn't really his room anymore. He'd moved out 20 years ago, but I'd kept it the way he left it. Posters on the walls, bands he'd loved in high school, most of them disbanded now. Trophies on the shelf from soccer and debate. His high school yearbooks in the closet. I sat on the bed and looked around, and I thought about the man my son had become. Ryan had always needed to be loved. It was his greatest gift and his greatest weakness. He gave love freely, easily, unconditionally. But he also needed it back, needed to feel secure, needed to know that the people around him approved of him. Victoria had understood that from the beginning. She'd made herself indispensable, made him feel chosen, special, worthy, and then, gradually, she'd started isolating him. Not obviously, not cruelly, but steadily. Less time with his college friends, fewer visits home, more focus on her family, her friends, her priorities. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already done. My son didn't leave me. He was taken. I found his old phone in a drawer the next morning. An iPhone, cracked screen, dead battery. He'd given it to me years ago when he upgraded, asking me to back it up just in case. I'd never gotten around to it. Now I plugged it in, waited for it to charge, and turned it on. His old messages were still there. I know I shouldn't have read them, but I was past the point of should. I was looking for the truth. I scrolled through conversations with friends, with colleagues, with me, and then I found a thread with Victoria from 4 years ago, before they were married. Most of it was what you'd expect. Couple stuff. Plans, jokes, photos, the everyday mundanity of two people building a life together. But there was one exchange that made me stop. Victoria, your mom asked about our finances today. Ryan, she's just curious. She worries. Victoria, she needs to learn boundaries. This is our life, not hers. Ryan, she doesn't mean anything by it. Victoria, I know. But we need to manage her expectations. She can't be this involved forever. Manage her expectations. That phrase. So clinical. So calculated. I scrolled further. Victoria, I've been thinking. Your parents have done well for themselves. The house, the savings. It would be smart to make sure you're protected if anything happens to them. Ryan, protected how? Victoria, legally. Make sure you're in the right position to handle their affairs if they can't. Ryan, that's a long way off. Victoria, maybe. But it's better to plan early. I've seen families torn apart by this stuff. I don't want that for us. Ryan, you're right. I'll talk to them about it. Victoria, let me handle it. You're too soft on them. I read that last line 3 times. Let me handle it. You're too soft. This wasn't a sudden plan. This wasn't recent. Victoria had been positioning herself for years. I spent the next 3 days going through everything on that old phone. Text messages, emails, notes, photos. Most of it was harmless. But scattered throughout were breadcrumbs. little moments that, looked at together, painted a picture. Victoria complaining about how much Harold and I talked to Ryan. Victoria suggesting Ryan create some distance after Harold's diagnosis. Victoria, after Harold died, telling Ryan that it was time for a fresh start and that dwelling on the past isn't healthy. And then, 6 months after the funeral, Victoria. I've been researching assisted living facilities. Some of them have programs for people who are still mostly independent, just in case your mom needs it someday. Ryan. She's fine. She's not even 65. Victoria. I know, but she's alone now. Things can change fast. We should be prepared. Ryan. I guess. It feels weird to think about. Victoria. That's why I'm thinking about it for you. I'm thinking about it for you. Like he was a child who couldn't be trusted with hard decisions. Like she was protecting him. From me. I brought everything to Catherine's office the next day. She read through the messages in silence, her face unreadable. When she finished, she set the phone down and looked at me. This is good, she said. Not conclusive. A defense attorney could argue she was just being practical, planning ahead. But it establishes a pattern, intent, premeditation. Combined with the Zoom recording, the bank inquiry, the phone purchase, we're building something real. What's the next step? 2 things. First, I'm going to file the protective declaration I mentioned. It'll put the court on notice that any POA or financial documents concerning you need judicial oversight. Second, I want David to dig into their finances. Ryan and Victoria's? Yes. If they're in debt, real debt, the kind that drives people to do desperate things, that's motive. And motive makes everything else we have more credible. I hesitated. Is that legal? Looking into their finances? David knows what he can and can't access. Public records, property filings, credit reports with proper authorization. We're not hacking anything. We're just looking at what's already out there. I thought about it, about my son's privacy, about what it would mean if we found something. Then I thought about what Victoria had said on that Zoom call. Once we get Maggie's assets under control, we're golden. Do it, I said. While we waited for David's financial report, I kept up appearances. The Sunday Zoom calls continued. I smiled, nodded, played the role of trusting mother. Victoria asked her questions, made her suggestions, and I responded exactly as I would have before I knew. It was harder than I expected. Not because I couldn't hide my feelings. 38 years of dealing with difficult parents and administrators had taught me how to mask, but because it hurt. Every conversation was a reminder of what I'd lost. Not just my daughter-in-law's love, but my belief in her. I'd wanted so badly for her to be real. On the 3rd Sunday of that month, something shifted. We were talking about Christmas plans. They wanted to come down for a real visit. When Victoria said something that made my blood run cold. Mom, I was talking to a friend who works in estate planning, and she mentioned something I'd never thought about. Did you know that if something happens to you suddenly, Ryan could be tied up in probate for months? Even years? The court would have to verify everything. Your will, your assets, your intentions. It's a nightmare. That does sound complicated, I said carefully. It is, but there are ways to avoid it. My friend said if you set up a revocable living trust, with Ryan as the trustee, everything would transfer smoothly. No courts, no delays, no lawyers taking a cut. A living trust. It's really common. Lots of people our age, your age, do it. It's just smart planning. I noticed the slip. Our age. She'd caught herself, but not quickly enough. I'll think about it, I said. I could send you some information. My friend said she'd be happy to walk you through it. That's very kind, sweetheart. But I'd want my own lawyer to look at anything before I signed it. A pause. Just a heartbeat. Of course. That's totally reasonable. But I heard the tightness in her voice, the barely concealed frustration. She was pushing, and I wasn't cooperating. David's report on Ryan and Victoria's finances came back 3 days before Christmas. It was worse than I'd imagined. Their house, the one Harold and I helped them buy, the one in Harmony Ridge with the stone facade and 3-car garage, was mortgaged to the hilt. They'd refinanced twice, pulling out equity each time. Their current loan balance was $489,000. The house was worth maybe $420,000. They were underwater by nearly $70,000, but that wasn't the worst part. Credit cards. Victoria had 6 of them, all maxed out. Total balance, $67,000. Personal loans, 2, both in Ryan's name. Total, $41,000. A car loan for Victoria's Mercedes. Balance, $38,000. Altogether, they owed over $600,000, and their combined income, according to tax records David had accessed, was $185,000 a year. After taxes, mortgages, minimum payments, and basic expenses, they were losing money every month. They're drowning, David said. Have been for at least 2 years. Based on the timeline, it started right after the pandemic. Victoria's company had layoffs, she took a pay cut, and they never recovered. But instead of adjusting their lifestyle, they just kept spending. I looked at the numbers, the credit card statements, the loan documents. Where did all this money go? Lifestyle, travel, clothes, the Mercedes, renovations on the house. Victoria's spending is substantial. But here's the interesting part. He pulled out another sheet. Ryan's spending is minimal. Most of his income goes straight to paying down debt, her debt. He's been trying to keep them afloat. So he knows how bad it is? He has to. His name is on half these loans. But based on the patterns, he's not the one driving the spending. He's just trying to clean up after it. I sat with that for a moment. My son wasn't just involved. He was trapped. Victoria had spent them into a hole so deep that the only way out was through my money, and he probably thought he had no choice. The midpoint of all this wasn't when I discovered the plot. It wasn't when I found the phone photo or the old messages or the financial records. It was when I realized what I was really dealing with. This wasn't family drama. This wasn't a daughter-in-law with boundary issues or a son who needed to stand up for himself. This was a system. A carefully designed, long-planned system to extract wealth from a vulnerable target, me, while maintaining the illusion of love and care. Victoria had been building it for years. The isolation, the gaslighting, the questions about my memory, the cultivation of Ryan as an unwitting accomplice, the recruitment of outside help. Every step had been calculated, and if I hadn't heard that Zoom call, if her microphone had actually muted, I would have walked right into the trap. I would have signed whatever she put in front of me. I would have ended up in a facility, confused and alone, while she sold my house and spent my pension. That's when I stopped being scared and started being angry. David came through with 2 more pieces of evidence before Christmas. The first was the identity of the woman on the phone with Victoria during the Zoom call. Her name was Sandra Marks. She was a financial planner based in Raleigh, specializing in what she called asset protection for high-net-worth families. High net worth is a stretch for Victoria and Ryan, David said dryly. But Ms. Marks has a reputation for helping people hide money from creditors, spouses, and inconvenient relatives. She's been investigated twice by the state bar, never charged, but not for lack of trying. So she's a professional at this. Professional is one word for it. Her consultation fee is $2,000. Victoria paid it 3 months ago according to credit card records. So Victoria had hired someone to help her steal from me. A consultant, an expert in financial exploitation. This wasn't impulsive. This was methodical. The second piece of evidence was even more damning. David had tracked down records from an assisted living facility in Pineville called Meadowbrook Gardens. Someone had inquired about placing a resident there, a woman in her late 60s, experiencing early cognitive decline. The inquiry was made 6 weeks ago. The contact information given was Victoria's. She's already picked out the facility, I said quietly. It looks that way. Meadowbrook Gardens isn't cheap, but it's not top tier either. The kind of place that asks fewer questions if the family is paying cash. So she planned to move me there and use my own money to pay for it, while keeping control of everything else. Yes. I closed my eyes. This is what happens to people like me, I thought. This is how it happens. Slowly, methodically, while everyone around them looks the other way. Not to me. Not anymore. Christmas Eve arrived. Ryan and Victoria pulled into my driveway at 2 p.m, their car loaded with luggage and presents. Victoria had coordinated the whole visit, when they'd arrive, what we'd eat, how long they'd stay. I met them at the door with a smile I'd practiced in the mirror. Mom. Ryan hugged me, and for a moment, just a moment, I let myself pretend everything was normal. He smelled like the aftershave Harold used to wear. I'd bought it for him every Christmas since he turned 16. It's so good to see you, I said. Victoria came up behind him, arms full of shopping bags. Merry Christmas, Mom. I brought everything for dinner. You don't have to lift a finger. How thoughtful. She hugged me too, and I felt her hands on my back. And I thought about those hands signing documents. Those hands reaching into my savings. Those hands taking everything I'd worked for. I hugged her back and kept smiling. The next 36 hours were performance on both sides. I played the role of trusting mother, grateful for their company, slightly forgetful, just as they expected. I asked Victoria to help me find things I knew exactly where they were. I repeated a story I'd already told, then apologized for my memory. I watched her exchange glances with Ryan. See? She's slipping, and I let her believe it. Meanwhile, I was recording everything. Every conversation, every suggestion, every carefully casual question about my finances. Mom, have you thought about what happens to the house if something happens to you? That was Victoria, Christmas morning, over coffee. I haven't really. I suppose Ryan would inherit it. Well, yes, but what about the process? Probate can take months, years even. It's such a burden. Have you considered putting Ryan on the deed now? It would make things so much simpler. I never thought about it. We could help you with that. I actually brought some paperwork, just in case you wanted to review it. And there it was. She actually pulled documents out of her bag. A deed transfer form, already filled out, only requiring my signature. I looked at it, at the boxes she'd already checked, at my name, typed neatly, next to a signature line. This is very thorough, I said. I just want to make sure you're protected, Mom. All of us do. I set the paper down. Can I think about it? I don't like to sign things without reading them carefully. A flicker crossed her face. Just a flash. Annoyance, frustration, before the mask settled back into place. Of course. Take all the time you need. We can talk about it again before we leave. That night, after they went to bed, I photographed every page of the document. Then I called Catherine. She brought a deed transfer, I said, keeping my voice low. Pre-filled. All I had to do was sign. That's aggressive, Catherine said, but also useful. Can you send me the photos? I did, right there on the call. Hold on, let me look at these. Maggie, this isn't just a deed transfer. Look at Clause 7. I zoomed in on my phone. What does it mean? It's a right of survivorship clause combined with an immediate partial conveyance. If you sign this, Ryan doesn't just inherit when you die. He becomes a co-owner immediately. And this clause here? It gives co-owners the right to sell without consent of other owners if they can demonstrate reasonable necessity. That's almost never enforceable, but it suggests they were planning to argue that selling was necessary if you objected. So if I signed this, they could have put your house on the market within weeks, claimed they needed the money for your care or their finances or anything else. By the time you realized what was happening, the sale could have been completed. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. She almost had me. Almost. But she didn't. And now we have documented proof that she tried. Christmas Day was unbearable. I sat through dinner, exchanged gifts, smiled at photos, all while knowing that the woman across from me was planning to steal my future. Victoria gave me a cashmere sweater. I saw it and thought of you, Mom. I thanked her and put it on. Ryan gave me a book, a biography of a librarian who'd saved books during World War II. He'd bookmarked a passage about courage in ordinary people. I thought you'd like it, he said. You were always like that. Quiet but strong. I looked at my son, at the circles under his eyes, at the way he kept glancing at Victoria, like he was waiting for her approval. Thank you, Ryan. It's perfect. After dinner, Victoria announced that she needed to make some work calls and disappeared upstairs. Ryan stayed behind, helping me wash dishes. We stood at the sink together, the way we had when he was a boy, when washing dishes was our time to talk. Mom, he said quietly, are you okay? You seem different. I kept my hands in the water. Different how? I don't know. Careful. Like you're watching everything. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. I'm just glad you're here, sweetheart. That's all. He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. The next morning, something changed. I woke up to voices downstairs, Ryan and Victoria arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone was clear, sharp, tense. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. She's not going to sign it, Ryan was saying. I told you this was too fast. Then we make her comfortable. Give her more time. Come back in January, February, keep working on her. Maybe she just doesn't want to. Have you considered that? Maybe she wants to keep the house in her name. And what happens when she dies? You want to spend 2 years in probate while the house sits empty and we lose everything we've built? We need that money, Ryan. We need it now. Silence. Then Ryan's voice, quieter. There has to be another way. There isn't. I've looked at every option. We're out of options. Your mother's equity is the only thing that can save us. She's my mother, Tori. And I'm your wife. You have to choose. Do you want to keep her happy and lose our house? Or do you want to secure our future? The longest pause I'd ever heard. Then Ryan's voice, barely above a whisper. I don't know. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, shaking. Not from fear. From grief. My son didn't know. He wasn't fully complicit. He wasn't evil. He was just lost. Trapped between a wife who controlled him and a mother he still loved but couldn't protect. And Victoria had just given him an ultimatum. Choose. I knew in that moment what I had to do. I had to give him a way out, a chance to choose right. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed leverage, I needed proof, and I needed witnesses. I needed to set a trap. They left on December 27th. Victoria was cold. The mask had slipped a little, her frustration showing. But she hugged me at the door and promised to call soon. "We'll figure out the paperwork together, Mom. There's no rush." "Of course, sweetheart." Ryan hugged me last, holding on a little longer than usual. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, son. More than you know." I watched their car pull away, and I let myself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then I dried my eyes and got to work. The trap took 2 weeks to build. Catherine handled the legal framework. We filed the protective declaration, notifying the court that any POA or property transfers concerning me required judicial review. We prepared a detailed affidavit documenting everything: the Zoom call, the bank inquiry, the phone purchase, the Christmas documents, the Meadowbrook Gardens inquiry. David tracked down the last pieces of evidence. He found additional communications between Victoria and Sandra Marks, not the content, which was protected, but the timestamps and frequency. 17 phone calls in 3 months, 8 emails, 3 in-person meetings at Sandra's office. This wasn't casual advice. This was ongoing collaboration. And then there was the final piece: the Zoom recordings. Catherine's subpoena to Zoom's legal department had finally come through. Victoria's account settings had automatic cloud recording enabled, probably so she could review work calls later, which meant every Sunday call she'd hosted was saved, including November 12th, including the 11 minutes where she thought she was on mute. I listened to the recording alone, late at night, with headphones. Hearing it again, her voice, so casual, so confident, was worse than I'd expected. She's completely clueless. She thinks we're calling to check on her. The pension, $4,200 a month. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her because she wants to believe I love her. And the worst part, the part that still wakes me up at 3 a.m. Do you love her? I love what she's worth. I saved the recording to 3 different devices. I sent copies to Catherine, to David, to a secure email account I'd created just for this. Then I made a decision. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to give my son a chance to choose. The plan was simple. Victoria wanted a family meeting about finances. I would give her one. But instead of a private conversation in my living room, it would be in Catherine's conference room, with witnesses, with documentation, with recordings ready to play, and with a clear choice for Ryan: stand with his wife or stand with the truth. I didn't know which he'd choose. Part of me was terrified he'd stay with Victoria even after hearing everything, that the hold she had on him was too strong. But I had to try. I called Ryan on January 3rd. "Hey, Mom, Happy New Year." "Happy New Year, sweetheart. Listen, I've been thinking about what Victoria suggested, the paperwork, the financial planning. I think we should talk about it." I could practically hear him perk up. "Really? That's great, Mom. Tori will be so relieved. I'd like to do it properly, though, with a lawyer present, just to make sure everything's done right." A pause. "A lawyer?" "It's a lot of money, Ryan. The house, the accounts. I want to make sure we're all protected. I found someone who specializes in this kind of thing. Her name is Catherine Walsh." Silence on the line. Then, "I'll have to talk to Victoria." "Of course. Let me know what works for you both." Victoria called me the next day. "Mom, Ryan said you want to meet with a lawyer. That's so responsible. I've been thinking about what you said, about being prepared." "Exactly. We just want to help you, Mom. Make sure everything's taken care of. Catherine's office is in Uptown Charlotte. She suggested January 15th at 2 p.m. Would that work? Victoria's voice was smooth, confident. She thought she'd won. That works perfectly. We'll be there. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I went through every piece of evidence over and over, memorizing details, anticipating questions. Catherine walked me through what would happen, how to stay calm, what to say if Victoria tried to deflect or deny. She's going to get defensive, Catherine warned. She might cry, accuse you of turning against her, claim you're confused or being manipulated. Don't engage with that. Just state facts, present evidence. Let the documentation speak for itself. What about Ryan? Catherine's expression softened. That's harder to predict. He might be angry. He might be relieved. He might not believe it at all. You need to be prepared for any of those responses. I know. Are you sure you want him in the room when we play the recording? I thought about it. About the son I'd raised. About the man he'd become. About the boy who cried at movies and brought home injured birds. Yes, I said. He needs to hear it. He needs to know what she really is. January 15th arrived cold and gray. I drove myself to Catherine's office, parked in the deck, and sat in my car for 10 minutes, just breathing. You can do this, I told myself. You've done harder things. You watched your husband die. You started over at 63. You survived. This is just one more thing to survive. The conference room was designed to intimidate. Long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charlotte skyline. Catherine at the head, David Chen at her side, a court reporter in the corner to transcribe everything. I was already seated when Ryan and Victoria arrived. Victoria walked in first, all smiles, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Ryan followed, looking uncomfortable in a suit I'd never seen before. He hadn't met my eyes since they'd walked in. Mrs. Hollister, thank you for coming, Catherine said. Please sit down. They sat across from me. The table between us felt like a canyon. Before we begin, Victoria said, I just want to say how much we appreciate Mom taking the initiative on this. Family financial planning is so important. Catherine nodded. I agree, which is why I think it's essential we start with complete transparency. Would that be acceptable to everyone? Of course. Victoria was still smiling. She had no idea. Catherine opened a folder. Mrs. Hollister, Maggie, has shared some concerns with me over the past few months. I've done some investigation into those concerns, and I've uncovered some information that I think everyone in this room needs to hear. Victoria's smile flickered. Concerns? About her finances, her property, her autonomy. Catherine looked directly at Victoria. And about attempts by family members to gain control of her assets. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria said. We've never tried to control anything. We've only tried to help. Let's start with this then. Catherine pulled out the deed transfer document, the one Victoria had brought to Christmas. Do you recognize this? Victoria glanced at it. That's just a basic deed form. We brought it in case Mom wanted to simplify her estate planning. It's not a basic deed form. It's a partial conveyance with a right of survivorship clause and a hidden provision allowing sale without owner consent under certain conditions. Did you explain those provisions to Maggie before asking her to sign? Silence. Ryan shifted in his seat. Tori, what is she talking about? It's nothing. Legalese. Every form does not have provisions that would allow you to sell your mother-in-law's home over her objections. Catherine's voice was level but sharp. This document was designed to give you control of the property while Margaret is still alive and competent. Victoria's composure was cracking. This is ridiculous. We were just trying to help. Let's talk about help. Catherine pulled out another sheet. On October 3rd, someone called First Citizens Bank and inquired about adding a signatory to Margaret's accounts and about power of attorney procedures. The call came from this phone number. She read it aloud. That's a prepaid cell phone purchased at a Walmart in South Charlotte on September 28th. We have security footage from that purchase. She slid a photo across the table. Ryan's face, clear as day, handing cash to a clerk. Ryan stared at the photo. His face had gone white. "Ryan," Catherine said quietly, "did you know what that phone was for when you bought it?" He didn't answer. He just kept staring at the photo. Victoria reached for his arm. "Ryan, don't say anything. This is obviously... Let him speak." Ryan looked up at me, at his mother, at the woman who'd raised him, loved him, given him everything. "Mom, I didn't know. She asked me to buy a phone for a surprise she was planning. She said it was for a gift. I didn't know what she..." Ryan stopped talking. But he couldn't stop. The dam had broken. "She told me you were getting confused, that you needed help managing things, that if we didn't step in, you'd lose everything. I thought we were protecting you." My heart was breaking, but I kept my voice steady. "Did you protect me, Ryan? Or did you help her?" He couldn't answer. Catherine let the silence hang for a moment. Then she pulled more documents from the folder. "There's more." On September 15th, an inquiry was made to Meadowbrook Gardens Assisted Living in Pineville. The caller asked about placement for a woman in her late 60s experiencing cognitive decline. The contact information given was Victoria Hollister's cell phone number. Victoria's face went pale. "I was just researching options, in case we ever needed them. There's nothing wrong with being prepared." The inquiry specified that the resident's family would be paying cash, and that minimal documentation would be required for admission. Catherine's voice was ice. "You weren't researching options. You were finding a place to put your mother-in-law where no one would ask questions. That's not... And then there's this." Catherine pulled out another sheet. "Sandra Marks, financial planner specializing in asset protection. You've had 17 phone calls with her in the past 3 months, 8 emails, 3 in-person meetings. Her consultation fee is $2,000, which you paid on September 2nd. Victoria was silent. "Ms. Marks is currently under investigation by the North Carolina State Bar for helping clients structure financial exploitation schemes. You were working with someone who specializes in exactly what you were planning to do to your mother-in-law." Ryan was staring at Victoria now, his face a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. "Tori," he said slowly, "what is she talking about?" Victoria didn't answer. Catherine let the silence hang for a moment. Then she reached for her laptop. "There's one more thing. This is going to be difficult to hear. But I think everyone in this room deserves to know the truth." She pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room. "She's completely clueless. Honestly, it's almost sad. She thinks we're calling to check on her." Ryan's head snapped up. "Every Sunday like clockwork. She has no idea." Victoria had gone rigid, her face a mask of controlled fury. "The pension, $4,200 a month. Plus, she's got savings, probably $200,000, maybe more." Ryan was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. "Once we have power of attorney, we move her into assisted living. We sell the house. It's worth at least $350 in this market, and put the money into her care." which means our care, our mortgage, our credit cards. Victoria's hands were shaking. That's taken out of context. I was venting to a friend. I didn't mean. Catherine didn't pause the recording. The best part is that she actually trusts me. She thinks I'm the daughter she never had. She'll sign anything I put in front of her because she wants to believe I love her. The other woman's voice. Do you? Love her? Victoria's voice, clear and cold and final. I love what she's worth. The recording ended. The room was silent. Victoria was the first to speak. This is entrapment. You can't use this. I didn't consent to being recorded. You were recorded by your own Zoom account, Catherine said calmly. On your own platform, with settings you enabled. There was no wiretap, no hidden device. You recorded yourself committing what North Carolina law classifies as attempted elder financial abuse. I haven't abused anyone. I haven't taken a penny. Intent to commit a crime is prosecutable under state law. Attempted theft, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of an older adult. The district attorney's office has been notified. They'll be making their own determination about charges. Victoria turned on me, and I saw for the first time the real face beneath the mask. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage. You ungrateful. After everything I've done for this family, you've done nothing for this family. My voice was quiet, but it stopped her cold. You've spent years lying, manipulating, and planning to steal from an old woman you pretended to love. The only thing you've done is show my son who he married. I turned to Ryan. I don't blame you, sweetheart. I know she convinced you. I know you thought you were helping. But you need to look at her now. Really look. And decide what kind of man you want to be. Ryan was crying, silently, tears running down his face, not making a sound. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I believed her. I thought. I know. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this. I know that too. I reached across the table and took his hand. And for a long moment, we just sat there, mother and son, grieving something that had already died. Victoria didn't go quietly. She demanded lawyers, threatened lawsuits, accused me of manipulation, abuse, senility. Everything she'd been planning to use against me, she hurled in my direction instead. Catherine handled it calmly. Mrs. Hollister, Victoria, you're welcome to hire counsel. They'll review the same evidence we have. They'll advise you that any civil action would be met with a countersuit for financial abuse, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They'll tell you that your best option is to accept responsibility and cooperate with any criminal investigation. Criminal investigation? The DA's office will make that determination. But I can tell you that based on the evidence we've compiled, they have ample grounds to pursue charges. Victoria stood up, knocking her chair back. This isn't over. Actually, Catherine said, it is. She nodded to David, who opened the conference room door. 2 uniformed officers were standing in the hallway. Mrs. Victoria Hollister, we'd like to speak with you about some financial matters involving Margaret Hollister. You're not under arrest at this time, but you'll need to come with us. Victoria looked at the officers, at Catherine, at me. Then, without another word, she walked out. Ryan didn't leave with her. He stayed in the conference room, his head in his hands, while the lawyers stepped out to give us privacy. What happens now? He asked finally. I don't know, sweetheart. I suppose that depends on you. She's going to. They might charge her with. Yes. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, devastated. I married her, Mom. I chose her. I let her do this. You were deceived. Was I? Or did I just not want to see? I didn't have an answer for that, because I'd wondered the same thing about myself all those years. What I know, I said slowly, is that you're here now. You stayed. You listened. That counts for something. Does it? It has to. Because if it doesn't, then there's no hope for any of us. The public part of the revelation came 3 weeks later. The DA's office had decided to pursue charges: attempted financial exploitation of an older adult, conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing false documents. The deed transfer had been drawn up with forged notary stamps, something Catherine's team discovered during their review. Victoria was arraigned on February 4th. The courtroom was small but crowded. Friends of mine from the library, neighbors, people who'd heard what happened and wanted to show support. Victoria's parents hired an expensive lawyer from Raleigh who tried to paint her as a stressed wife, a victim of financial pressure, a woman who'd made mistakes but never meant real harm. My client was under tremendous financial strain, the lawyer argued. She made poor decisions, yes, but she never actually took any money from Mrs. Hollister. There was no theft, only planning. This should be handled as a family matter, not a criminal one. The prosecutor wasn't having it. This wasn't a stressed wife making poor decisions, she said. This was a calculated, multi-year scheme to systematically exploit an elderly woman. The defendant researched assisted living facilities. She hired a financial consultant specializing in asset protection. She created documents designed to transfer property without the victim's informed consent. She deliberately damaged her mother-in-law's relationship with her son by convincing him his mother was mentally incapacitated. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. The judge agreed. Bail was set at $50,000, which her parents paid. But the conditions included no contact with me, no access to any of my accounts or property, and surrender of her passport. The trial was set for June. In the meantime, Ryan filed for divorce. It wasn't clean. Nothing about this was clean, but it was final. He moved out of the Harmony Ridge house, which went into foreclosure proceedings almost immediately, and rented a small apartment in South Charlotte. He called me every day for the first month, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to hear my voice. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said one night. "You're the same person you've always been. You just lost your way for a while. How can you forgive me? Because you're my son. Because I love you. Because that's what families are supposed to do." Silence on the line. "I love you too, Mom." Victoria's trial lasted 4 days. I testified on the first day. Catherine prepped me for hours, but nothing could have prepared me for sitting on that witness stand, looking at the jury, and telling strangers the story of how my daughter-in-law tried to steal my life. The prosecutor walked me through it methodically. The Zoom calls, the suspicious questions, the stove incident, the recording, the deed transfer. Everything I documented, every piece of evidence, laid out in sequence. "Mrs. Hollister, when you heard your daughter-in-law say she loved what you were worth, what did you feel?" I looked at Victoria, sitting at the defense table in a conservative dress, her face arranged in practiced contrition. "I felt like I was already gone," I said, "like she'd already erased me." On cross-examination, Victoria's lawyer tried to paint me as paranoid, easily confused, possibly suffering from early dementia. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Hollister, that you've been experiencing memory issues?" "No." "Your daughter-in-law claims you frequently forgot details of conversations, that you repeated stories, that you left the stove on during Thanksgiving. I never left the stove on. Victoria turned it on herself while I was out of the kitchen to create the impression that I was forgetful. That's quite an accusation. Do you have any proof? I have the text message she sent to Ryan immediately after the incident, which reads, "See? Told you she's slipping. We need to act before it gets worse." I also have a timestamp photo of my stove showing all burners off, taken 2 hours before they arrived. The lawyer had no response to that. Other witnesses testified. The bank teller who'd noted the suspicious inquiry on my account. The Walmart employee who'd processed the phone purchase. The administrator from Meadowbrook Gardens who'd taken Victoria's call. Sandra Marks, the financial consultant, pleading the fifth on every question, but confirming through her silence that there was plenty to hide. And Ryan. My son took the stand on day 3. He was nervous. I could see it in the way he gripped the armrest, the way his voice shook when he stated his name. But he told the truth. He told the jury how Victoria had convinced him I was declining, how she'd planted doubts, manufactured incidents, isolated him from me, how she'd told him the financial planning was necessary, protective, loving. She made me believe my mother was losing her mind, he said. And I believed her because I wanted to believe that someone was looking out for all of us. "Did you know about the Zoom recording?" the prosecutor asked. "No." "Did you know your wife was planning to place your mother in assisted living and sell her home?" "No. She told me we were preparing for possibilities, for emergencies. She never said—" His voice broke. "She never said she was going to take everything." "And when you heard the recording, what did you realize?" Ryan looked at Victoria, then at me. "I realized I'd married a stranger," he said, "and I'd almost helped her destroy my mother." The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Victoria was sentenced to 3 years in state prison, suspended to 18 months with mandatory restitution. She would have to repay every cent she'd cost me, the legal fees, the investigator fees, the emotional damage she'd calculated so carefully. As the bailiff let her out, she looked at me. Just once. Just for a second. I saw nothing in her eyes, no remorse, no understanding, just calculation, even now, trying to figure out how this had happened, how she'd lost. I didn't look away. They thought I was finished. I wasn't. The last piece of public accounting was the house. Ryan couldn't afford to keep it. The foreclosure went through in May, but the bank's sale brought in just enough to cover the remaining mortgage, leaving him debt-free for the first time in years. He moved into a modest condo in an older neighborhood. No stone facades, no HOA fees, just a place to live. I visited him there in June after the trial ended. The condo was small but clean. He'd put up some of Harold's old pictures on the walls. A bookshelf in the corner held the biography he'd given me for Christmas, and a dozen other books I'd sent him over the months. "It's nice," I said. "It's nothing like what we had." "That's not a bad thing, Ryan." He looked around at his modest living room, at the second-hand couch and the bare kitchen. "I think you might be right." 6 months after the trial, I planted a garden. It sounds like nothing, just dirt and seeds and water. But for me, it was everything. Harold and I used to talk about gardening, about what we'd plant when we retired, when we finally had time. Tomatoes and peppers and herbs, a little plot in the backyard where things could grow. We never got around to it. Harold died too soon, and then I was alone, and gardening alone felt like just another reminder of what I'd lost. But that summer, something had shifted. I wasn't alone anymore. Ryan came over on weekends, helped me turn the soil, argued with me about whether tomatoes belonged in partial shade or full sun. We got dirt under our fingernails and sweat on our foreheads, and we talked about things that mattered and things that didn't. "Mom, you're putting the basil too close to the tomatoes. Harold always said basil helps tomatoes grow." Did he know anything about gardening? Not a thing, but he was confident about it. Ryan laughed. It was the first time I'd heard him really laugh in over a year. We rebuilt something, slowly, carefully. The way you rebuild anything that's broken. The garden produced more than I could use. I gave tomatoes to Mrs. Patterson, peppers to the woman at the church, herbs to anyone who would take them. I started volunteering at the library again, not as staff, but as a reading tutor. 3 afternoons a week, helping kids who struggled with phonics, with comprehension, with believing that words could matter. One of the kids, a 10-year-old named Marcus, asked me once why I liked books so much. "Because books don't lie," I told him. "People lie. Situations lie. But books, the good ones anyway, they tell you the truth, even when it's hard." What if you can't tell if someone's lying? I thought about Victoria, about all the lies she'd told, and all the ones I'd believed. Then you pay attention. You look at what people do, not just what they say, and you keep records. Marcus looked confused. "Records?" "Write things down, save messages, remember dates. If something feels wrong, document it. Because someday you might need to prove that you're not the crazy one." He was too young to understand, but maybe someday he would. I started writing letters to my former students, the ones who'd stayed in touch over the years, checking in, remembering, letting them know they were still thought of. One of them, a woman named Teresa who'd been in my library 30 years ago, wrote back, "Mrs. H., I don't know if you remember me. I was the kid who hid in the fiction section every day because I didn't want to go home. You never asked me why. You just made sure there was always a chair for me and a book on hold. I'm a social worker now. I help kids like I was, kids whose homes aren't safe, kids who need someone to see them. You were that person for me. I never told you, but you were. Thank you." I read that letter 17 times. Then I put it in a frame on my wall next to Harold's photo. Some things are worth more than money, and I started living in the present instead of waiting for the future to betray me. I took a pottery class at the community center. I was terrible at it, but I loved the feeling of clay in my hands. I joined a book club that met at the coffee shop downtown. Real discussions, not polite nods. I went to a Zumba class with Mrs. Patterson, who was 83 years old, and put me to shame. "How are you so energetic?" I asked her, gasping for breath. "Spite," she said cheerfully. "I've outlived 3 husbands, and everyone who ever told me I couldn't do something. I'm not stopping now." I decided to adopt that philosophy. One afternoon in October, almost a year after that Zoom call, Ryan came over unannounced. He had a box with him, brown cardboard, taped shut. "I found this when I was cleaning out the last of Tori's stuff," he said. "I thought you should see it." I opened the box. Inside were papers, dozens of them, printed emails, handwritten notes, legal documents, all related to me. "What is this?" "Her files, on you. She had a whole system." Ryan's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Notes on every conversation, a timeline of your decline, draft documents she was working on, research on assisted living facilities that specialize in difficult placements." I flipped through the pages, saw my name over and over in her neat handwriting. M showing signs of confusion. M asked same question twice. M mentioned H in present tense. Possible disorientation. Every Sunday call, every visit, every moment I'd thought was normal, she'd been documenting, analyzing, building a case. She was going to use all of this, Ryan said, to convince a judge you were incompetent, to get conservatorship. I know. Mom, I read these. I saw what she wrote, and I can't believe I didn't see it. I closed the box. You see it now. That's what matters. Is it enough? I looked at my son, at the lines on his face, the gray in his hair, the weight of everything he'd carried and lost. It has to be, I said, because it's what we have. We sat on my porch that evening, drinking sweet tea, watching the sun go down. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. When did you know that something was wrong? I thought about it. I knew something was wrong the night of the stove incident. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. I paused. And then I heard the Zoom call, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Why didn't you confront us right away? Because Victoria would have spun it. She would have convinced you I was having an episode, and you would have believed her. You wanted to believe her. He winced, but he didn't deny it. I needed proof, I continued. Not for the law or the courts or the lawyers, for you, so you could see with your own eyes who you married, so the decision would be yours. What if I'd chosen wrong? What if I'd stayed with her even after? I reached over and took his hand. Then I would have lost you, but at least I would have known I gave you the choice. He was quiet for a long moment. You know what I keep thinking about? He finally said. That recording, when she said she loved what you were worth. I try not to think about it. I can't stop thinking about it, because it made me realize she said the same things about me. Different words, but the same meaning. She didn't love me either. She loved what I provided, the status, the stability, the access to you. Ryan, I was just a tool to her, Mom, a means to an end, and I was so desperate to be loved that I couldn't see it. I squeezed his hand. That's not weakness, sweetheart. That's being human. We all want to be loved. We all make ourselves vulnerable for it. The people who exploit that, they're the weak ones, not us. He didn't say anything, but he didn't let go of my hand either. The moral of this story isn't simple. It's not trust no one, or family will always hurt you, or the world is cruel and you can't protect yourself. It's more complicated than that. The moral is that trust is a gift, and some people abuse gifts. The moral is that love can make you blind, but it doesn't have to keep you blind forever. The moral is that evidence matters, not because the world is fair, but because without evidence, the people who hurt you get to define the story. And the moral is that you're never too old to learn, to fight, to refuse to be erased. I'm 68 years old now. I live in the same house where I raised my children and buried my husband. I have a garden that produces more than I can eat, a library that welcomes me back, and a son who calls me every Sunday. I survived. Not because I was lucky, not because someone saved me, because I stayed calm, I gathered proof, I told the truth, and because in the end, I believed I was worth fighting for. There's one more thing. After everything, the trial, the sentencing, the aftermath, I received a letter. No return address. Handwritten, postmarked from the correctional facility where Victoria was serving her time. I almost didn't open it, but something made me. The letter was short, just a few lines. Margaret, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that you were right about one thing. I underestimated you. V, I read it twice. Then I put it in the box with all the other documentation and closed the lid. She was right. She had underestimated me. They thought I was finished. I wasn't. Last month, Ryan asked if he could bring someone to Thursday dinner. Her name is Allison. She's a middle school teacher, divorced, no children. She has kind eyes and a quiet voice and laughs at Ryan's terrible jokes. I liked her immediately. Not because she's perfect, not because she'll never make mistakes or hurt my son, but because when Ryan introduced her, he wasn't watching for her approval. He wasn't waiting to be told how to feel. He was just himself. That's all I ever wanted for him. The night Allison came to dinner, I gave her a tour of the house. I showed her the grandfather clock that Harold's father made, the bookshelf full of first editions I'd collected over decades, the garden out back, still producing tomatoes even in late October, and I showed her the box. Not Victoria's box. I'd burned that one, finally, on the anniversary of the trial. The box I showed Allison was different. It held every piece of evidence I'd gathered. The recordings, the documents, the photographs, the timeline I'd written, the notes from Catherine and David, the court transcripts. Ryan told me what happened, Allison said quietly. But he said you were the one who figured it out, who built the case. I just did what needed to be done. That's not nothing. That's incredible, actually. I looked at her. At this woman my son had brought into my home, who looked at the story of the worst year of my life and saw not weakness, but strength. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. That night, after Ryan and Allison left, I sat on my porch and watched the stars come out. The air was cool, the cicadas were singing. Mrs. Patterson's terrier barked at something in the distance, then fell silent. And I thought about what I'd learned, about evidence, about patience, about the difference between believing the best in people and refusing to see the truth, about the importance of records, documentation, proof, and about love. Love isn't blind. At least it doesn't have to be. Love sees clearly. Love pays attention. Love notices when something's wrong, even when it wants to believe everything's fine. And sometimes, love fights. 3 years have passed since I heard my daughter-in-law plot to steal everything I'd worked for. 3 years since I sat in that conference room and watched my son's world collapse. 3 years since I learned that the person I'd welcomed into my family saw me as nothing but a number on a balance sheet. Victoria served 11 months of her sentence before being released for good behavior. She moved back in with her parents in Raleigh. She doesn't contact me. The restraining order I obtained ensures that, and I have no interest in contacting her. The restitution payments arrive every month, $847, deducted automatically from her accounts. It will take her 12 more years to pay everything back at this rate. I don't need the money. I donate most of it to the legal aid clinic that helps elderly victims of financial abuse. It feels right. Turning her scheme into something that helps people like me. Ryan is doing better. He found a therapist who specializes in recovery from coercive relationships. He's working through years of manipulation, learning to trust his own judgment again, rebuilding the confidence his wife systematically dismantled. He got promoted at work last year. He joined a hiking group, something he'd always wanted to do, but Victoria had dismissed as pointless. He's dating Allison seriously now, cautiously, carefully, but seriously. He comes to dinner every Thursday. We cook together, the way we used to when he was a teenager, spaghetti and garlic bread, or Harold's famous pot roast, or sometimes just sandwiches and soup when we're both too tired to do more. We don't talk about Victoria. We don't need to. We talk about books, about the garden, about memories of Harold and the life we had before everything changed. We talk about the future, Last week he asked me what I wanted for my birthday. Nothing, I said. Just you. Just dinner and conversation, and maybe a walk in the garden. That's it? That's everything, sweetheart. That's always been everything. He hugged me then, long and tight, the way he used to when he was small. I love you, Mom. I love you too, more than you know. I'm 70 now. My pension still arrives every month. My savings are secure. My house is paid off and belongs only to me. I have my garden and my library and my son. I have Thursday dinners and Sunday phone calls and letters from former students who remember when reading felt like magic. I have a life. Not the life I expected. Not the life Harold and I planned together all those years ago. But a good life. A real life. A life I built with my own hands, from the ruins of what someone else tried to steal. If you're reading this and you're facing something similar, I want you to know, you are not too old. You are not too weak. You are not too confused. You are exactly as capable as you've always been. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone make you doubt what you know to be true. And if they do, stay calm, gather proof, and fight like hell. That's what I did. That's what I'd do again. And that's why I'm still here, on this porch, under these stars, telling you this story. Because someone needed to hear it. Maybe you. Thank you for reading to the very end. If this story mattered to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below. Have you ever caught someone in a lie by accident? What did you do? And don't forget to follow for more stories like this, true stories, told by the people who lived them. I'll be here. Maggie, 1 year later. I thought the story was over. I thought I'd written the ending, tied up the loose threads, moved on with my life. I was wrong. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, about a year after the trial ended. I was at the library, tutoring Marcus. He'd made incredible progress, reading 2 grade levels above where he'd started, when my phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Mom, call me when you can. It's important. I finished the session, said goodbye to Marcus, and called Ryan from my car. What's wrong? It's Tori. His voice was strange, flat. She's out. Early release for good behavior. I'd known this was coming. The sentence had been 18 months, and she'd been a model prisoner. Of course she had. Victoria was always good at performing whatever role served her best. Okay, I said carefully. She has a restraining order. She can't contact either of us. That's not why I'm calling. A pause. Mom, she's engaged. What? To someone she met in prison. A guy whose mother is in assisted living. A guy who just inherited his father's estate. I felt cold. Ryan, what are you telling me? I'm telling you she's doing it again. Same playbook, different target. I drove home in a daze. Of course she was doing it again. Why wouldn't she? The scheme had only failed because I'd caught her by accident, because she'd forgotten to mute her microphone. Without that one mistake, she would have succeeded, and she knew it. She'd learned from her errors. She'd refined her approach, and now someone else was in her crosshairs. That night, I called Catherine Walsh. She's not our problem anymore, Catherine said. The restraining order protects you and Ryan. Anything she does to someone else is outside our jurisdiction. Can we warn them? The family she's targeting? We could try. But Maggie, think about this. If someone showed up at your door 3 years ago and told you your daughter-in-law was planning to steal from you, would you have believed them? I thought about it. About how charming Victoria had been. About how much I'd wanted to believe she was real. No, I admitted. I would have thought they were crazy. Exactly. The best predictor of manipulation is experience with it. People who haven't been burned don't believe fire is real. So we just let it happen? Catherine was quiet for a moment. You could write to the family, send documentation, make sure they have access to the trial records if they ever want them, plant the seed, and hope it grows before she harvests everything? It's the best we can do. The rest is up to them. I did write the letter. It took me 3 days to get the words right. I explained who I was, what had happened, why I was reaching out. I included copies of the court documents, the recording transcript, the evidence we'd compiled. I sent it to the address David had found for Victoria's new fiancé, a man named Gerald, whose mother lived in a memory care facility in Asheville. I never got a response. Maybe he threw it away. Maybe Victoria intercepted it. Maybe he read it and decided I was the crazy one. I'll never know. 6 months later, I saw a news article online. Asheville man claims fiancé defrauded elderly mother. I read every word. Gerald had discovered that Victoria had been making unauthorized withdrawals from his mother's accounts. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here and there, then larger sums. By the time he noticed, she'd taken over $40,000. She'd also convinced him to add her to the deed of his mother's house. For protection, she'd said, in case anything happens. The same words, the same playbook. But this time there was no recording, no unmuted Zoom call, just one man's word against his charming fiancée's.